Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are watching from and tuning in. Welcome to our session today. My name is Brittany Cole, and you might be joining us on LinkedIn, which I have to just go ahead and let you know is my favorite online social media platform, place and space to hang out. Or you might be catching this on the replay over on YouTube or on one of our other platforms. But wherever you are tuning in from, welcome. We are so thrilled that you're here. I'm glad that you're here. And I'm really, really excited about our conversation today. So, as we are kicking things off, we'll be here for about, I have it aimed for about 50 minutes for today, most of which, or about half of which, will be Q&A. So I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to ask questions, to really dig into this conversation around speaking up in order to stand out. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And as you're joining, something that we always like to do at Career Thrivers to really give an opportunity for you to check in with yourself throughout the day and throughout the session, also so that we can check in with you as well. It's just to kind of do just a quick little emotional check. So the way that we do this, we pull a page from Brené Brown. At the height of 2020, she shared in what was an article in Inc. magazine, but she was sharing a practice that she does with her team. And that is they drop two words. So if you're meeting online, into the chat. So that's what we'll do here, into the comment section to just identify how you're feeling in this moment. So I want to invite you into that opportunity. It's something that we've been doing since I read that article, and I always love it. It gives us an opportunity to just name our emotions. We don't talk about it. There's no judgment. There's no need to explain anything, right? You just drop the first words that come to mind. So here's the question. If you had to describe how you're feeling right now in this moment, and you could only use two words, what would those two words be? So drop them into the comments. Even if you are tuning in on the replay, I'll come back around and just acknowledge, right? And if you see someone's words, what you might notice, and I always love when this happens whenever we are in workshops or sessions with leaders, is that you'll see like, oh, that's the same word that I used, right? Or that's exactly how I'm feeling right now. And that's always such a good feeling of confirmation and affirmation that you are not alone, because you're not. You're not. So wherever you are in your journey, wherever you are in your week, if you are tuned in live, it's November the 28th, 2023, and I'm thrilled that you are here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and let you know, share with you, I am definitely a visual learner. So I have a few visuals today. Okay. I don't want you to feel like you're in a presentation. Okay. This is definitely going to be a conversation, but just as a nod for those of us who tend to be a bit more visual in how we consume information, but also really how we retain it. Because the goal for today is that you will find one thing. Right. So this is what will be my challenge to you. And I will share my screen and we will dive into this discussion. Identify one thing, okay? One thing that you want to take with you to implement on the other side of this time together. So whether you're here live with us, whether you're tuned in on the replay and I'm coming back around and checking out your comments, identify one thing, right? If you have more than that, fantastic. But I want you to at least have one thing that you say, you know what? This is what I'm going to take with me. This is what I want to implement as we move forward. Sound good? Give me a yes in the comments if that sounds good to you. If you're on board, you're tracking with me, you're like, yes, Brittany, I'm good with that. I can do that. I can pick one thing. I can identify one thing that I really want to hone in on. Then let me know in the comments and we will kick things off. All right. So here we are. Let's dive into this discussion. Okay. So a few visuals, again, just for those of us who are more apt to learning in this way. So speak up, stand out, how to amplify your voice to thrive in your career. And really what we're going to talk about today is the importance of amplifying your voice, but also some practical ways for you to do that in a various number of situations. And I want, as you are listening in, tuning in today from wherever you are, for you to let me know your questions or you can drop scenarios into the comments so that we can actually workshop this, right? We can actually give some language to, especially some of the difficult conversations. The last thing that I will say is, depending on where you are in terms of your organization, this is likely a time where you are thinking about your year-end review, right? You might be doing a self-assessment. You might be, planning to have a scheduled meeting with your leader, if you haven't already, in December, to really talk through your performance for 2023. So these are some tools and some practical insights that you can apply in those conversations as well, right? As you're thinking about how you're taking your career to the next level. Okay, confirming that you can see me, you can hear me. I love it. I see y'all on Instagram. So let's dive in. So why does this matter? Why are we here today? Why is this the topic of conversation? Okay. So one, I kind of hinted at just a few minutes ago, right? This time of the year is usually the time of year when you get an opportunity to advocate for yourself. If no one's told you this week, let me be the first. You, my friend, are your best advocate in the workplace. You are also your best advocate in your business, right? So whether you are leading inside of a corporation or branching out and starting your own company, you are your best advocate for what it is that you want to see in your career as an authentic leader. So this is an important topic because, one, your voice is directly connected to visibility and recognition. So when you speak up, it helps to bring visibility to the value that you bring to the work you choose to do. So your ideas, your expertise, right? Not only in your professional life and in your career, but also personally, right? So that's the first reason why we're here, because your voice matters for visibility and recognition. Second, it matters for your influence and impact. John C. Maxwell says it like this: leadership is influence. And I don't know any leader that doesn't want to make an impact in the work that they choose to do. So when you amplify your voice, when you turn up the volume a little bit, right, you're helping to cultivate connections with other leaders to shape and drive the change you want to see in your community, with your customers, inside of your company, right? And many of you do that really, really well because you are part of organizations, kind of, I think of them as kind of a subset organization or group inside of your organization, affinity groups, like maybe a women's ERG, right? Employee resource group or business resource group, or your company may call them a colleague resource group, right? So an affinity group where you get to come together with like motivated individuals, you share some commonalities, and you're working towards a defined goal, right? Or a group of defined goals. But that is one of many ways. And many of you are in that space. So you're really helping to drive positive change in terms of engagement and culture at your company. Your voice matters for that. And then last, but certainly not least, right? We're called Career Thrivers for a reason, right? It's our hope and mission that you are able to work in an environment where you aren't just barely surviving, but one where you're boldly thriving, one where there's alignment between your strengths, what we call your visa, your VISA, your values, your interests, your skills, and your abilities, and the work that you choose to do to drive business impact inside of your company, right? We would hope that there's alignment there. And when there is alignment there, right, our frameworks and experience has shown us that that's when professionals thrive. That's when leaders thrive. And so many of you, right, are in a time and space, especially this time of the year, where you're thinking about what is next for my career, right? So improving your communication skills, even if you say, Brittany, I definitely am thinking about what's next for my career, but that doesn't necessarily mean I want to move up, right? Advancement doesn't always mean promotion or title change, right? It could mean you're growing in your role, you're advancing in your role, you're increasing your depth of experience, but also competency in your current role. Maybe that's your goal over the next 18 months, and that's okay too. But here's the bottom line: wherever you fall, whether you're looking to get promoted and change roles or transition organizations, or you're looking to grow inside of your role, effective communication skills is core to thriving, right? It is foundational. Being able to express your ideas, being able to express, here it is, especially for women that are on here, the business impact that you make on your team and inside of your company is mission critical for thriving in your career. So that's why we're here today. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm excited about this session. Now you might say, you know what? It's not typical that I log on to LinkedIn and I see slides and I see someone presenting and sharing impactful information. Well, we'll say that that's true because we are not typical. So my name is Brittany Cole. I'm the CEO and founder of Career Thrivers, and we have a phenomenal team that really helps organizations take their most valuable asset and amplify it, right? Take it to the next level. And that's the people, right? The people are an organization's greatest asset. And we believe that when people are engaged, right? Not disengaged, not kind of apathetic about the work that they get to do, but when people are engaged, when they are retained, right? When they're not looking for the first chance out the door, right? And when people are thriving in their career, then also the business thrives. You're able to have more impact and more efficiency, more effectiveness with your customers, right? It directly impacts the bottom line. So we're a leadership development firm. We work at the intersection of inclusion and equity because we believe DEI isn't an attachment. It's a core competency of leadership development. So we're leadership development. We work with corporations, primarily in the financial services, tech and manufacturing industries, but many others as well, helping with curriculum design, to really tailored programming to develop, engage, and retain women and professionals of color, right? And so that's the work that we get to do. We have an incredible team of coaches that you can see here on the slide. And many of you that are watching this are a part of our Rise and Thrive Women's Leaders Program. And so if you're part of Rise and Thrive, just give us a wave in the comments. It's so good to see you, and a very special hello to the incredible emerging women leaders at Bridgestone, at Caterpillar, who were a part of our program that kicked off in May of this year. And so to share with you a little bit about that and really how we come to this work in this topic, this Rise and Thrive Advancing Women Leaders program is all around helping companies to develop emerging leaders, but also cultivate a culture where women want to stay. Right? Women not only see that there's a pathway or that there's a career pathway, but they believe there's a career pathway for them. Right? And that's a very different sense of belonging. That's also, though, a leader for leaders, it's a very different sense of engagement and also a very different sense of performance, right? When women believe like this organization, this team, this culture is for me, I can thrive here. So this program, we partner with corporations and they look at their emerging women leaders and they say, hey, we want to nominate these women to be a part of this program. And so we kick off with 3 days. This year was in May. In 2024, it will be in May as well. So a 3-day coaching intensive around leadership development here in Nashville, Tennessee, which is where we're based. And then the participants continue on with 6 months of coaching. And so this session is actually a part of that. And we open it up to you if you're like, I've never heard of the Rise and Thrive program, right? So you can learn more about it, but also so that we can help you on your journey as well. And this is just an easy platform on LinkedIn for people to listen in and get great information. All right. So what are some of the barriers that we see, particularly when it comes to women, which is where I'm going to focus in today? So these are the top 3, right? So when we survey women, when we work with organizations, industry agnostic, I would even say sector agnostic, because we have a couple of different sectors that we work with as well. These are the 3 top barriers. One, there's this feeling of self-doubt and fear, right? Here's what it looks like. You're in a 30-minute meeting. At minute 5, an idea enters your mind of something that would be impactful to the conversation. You wait to minute 25 to decide to share it. That's what that looks like, right? Because I want to make sure that this is practical for you. You could Google this topic and get information. I want to make sure this hones in on what you might be experiencing, right? So that sense of self-doubt, right, keeps you from speaking up. Right? You're thinking in your mind, like, is this really valuable? I want to make sure I say it the right way. I want to make sure that it's received the right way. I want to make sure this is the right tone. And then what sometimes happens, I know this has definitely happened to me, where I'm in that space where I'm overthinking my contribution. And then someone says the thing that I am thinking at minute 15. Meanwhile, I've been sitting there the past 10 minutes and had that idea first, right? And I didn't share it, right? So self-doubt and fear is a barrier. The second barrier, though, is not only on women who overthink, right, in this example, but it's also a cultural and societal. This is why we're so committed to the work of, hey, Stephanie, good to see you. It's why we're so committed to the work of helping leaders understand that inclusion is not your HR team's job. It's everybody's job, right? I shared on social, on LinkedIn yesterday that diversity is inevitable, inclusion is individual, and equity is structural, right? So this whole idea of being an inclusive leader is like, it's a one-on-one thing, right? It's about the responsibility of leaders to be able to bring the best out of anyone. And that sometimes that is not the case, right? Sometimes there's not psychological safety on a team. Sometimes there is not an environment that's cultivated where you truly believe you can speak up, right? Without retribution, which is what psychological safety is. So that is one of the reasons. That's a barrier, right? So it's not all on us to like cultivate the skill. You also need to be in an environment where you are championed to speak up, right? And given the space to do that, right? And so there's some information in here that's pertinent to all of us as professionals, right? As leaders of self, as we like to say, it's our foundational level of leadership. But there's also some information in here that's pertinent to leaders of people. In terms of the question for the people leader becomes, how then do I create a culture where anyone on my team, not most people, right, but everyone on my team believes that they can speak up, right? That's the question to overcome the cultural and societal barrier. And then the last barrier is just a lack of confidence. Here's what I need you to know about confidence, all right? Here's what I need you to know. I love it. Suzanne says, that looks like me 6 years ago. Me too. Okay. Usually when I'm having conversations or we're doing workshops on this topic, I'm like, listen, I don't have to reach far for antidotes, right? I have plenty of stories of moments where I've overthought my own thinking in meetings, right? Pushed past the moment of like, Brittany, you need to say this, and then the moment passes, right? Or felt the weight of like, I'm not reporting into a leader that values my thoughts and opinions. I'm not reporting into someone who really wants to hear what I have to say, right? That's the cultural and societal barrier. And then the lack of confidence looks like a lack of competence. Here's what I want you to know about confidence. Competence breeds confidence. Competence breeds confidence. So then how do you become more competent? Here's the mistake in the thinking. Most people think they need more information to become more competent, right? And I know you may be thinking, well, Brittany, that sounds like a little bit of an oxymoron. I'm sitting here in the session with you right now. This is information. Yes, and here's what I want to encourage you with. This information alone will not make you more confident. You need courage that will give you the experience to create competence that will lead to confidence, right? So said even more simply, when it comes to confidence, I need you to prioritize courage over clarity, right? So the question isn't, I need to know the perfect thing to say in order to speak up. The question is, are you going to harness the courage to speak up, even though you don't know that this is the perfect thing to say? Very different question, right? And also it's a very different mindset that you have to shift into. It's a growth mindset. It becomes a paradigm shift that when I'm sitting in the meeting, the shift that especially an emerging woman leader has to make is, I'm not going to sit here and overthink whether or not my contribution will be valuable. I'm going to make the contribution anyway, right? That's what courage looks like. And then as you harness more courage to create more competence, now I know, right? I can make the adjustments, which we'll talk about, right? In terms of using my voice, then that will boost my confidence, right? So it's this beautiful cycle that courage creates clarity, not I'm waiting on clarity to get the courage to act. I harness the courage, I take the action. As I have more reps, right? As I'm practicing this skill more, I'm speaking up more, I'm learning more. Guess what that is? competence. And then guess what that does? It increases my confidence. All right. So these are the 3 barriers. Let me know if you're tracking with me. Okay. I see y'all in the comments. Yes. Competence breeds confidence. Yes. So here's like one of my personal values is ownership. Right. And some people hear that, they automatically think it's entrepreneurial. No, it's everything, right? It's owning the power of like, I can release myself from the overthinking that I need to like find confidence. I don't need to find confidence. Let me help the women that are on here that are ambitious, right? And you're looking at like, what's my next transition? What's my next opportunity to lead? Where am I being called to lead next? Is it this role? Is it a different role? If you're in that space, right, and you're feeling some doubt, I don't want you to think of it from the lens of having to find the confidence like it's outside of you, right? You build confidence through you by having the courage to take action. And that, like, there's no better way to build confidence than through competence, which is built through courage and action taking. Right? It's completely different than someone telling you you're great, right? And sometimes that's what we're waiting for. We're waiting for affirmation that really looks like confirmation of things that you already know. Like, you are brilliant. You are great. You are an incredible leader. You do have the capacity to lead. You are ready for the role. You are able to take on the project and to succeed at it. Now go get some proof. Harness the courage to take the action, learn, and that builds your confidence. All right. So here are some techniques then, right? So if we say that those are the barriers, right? If those are the barriers, then here are some ways to improve your communication skills. Okay. And so these are 3 big ones. The first is active listening, right? And so here's what I mean by that. And I want to make it as practical as possible so that you can take action on this if this is your area for action taking, right? We made a commitment. We're going to pick one. Okay. So what active listening looks like in a work environment is understanding what matters to the person that you're speaking to. Right. So when we use that, what I think is an overused word in communication, especially when you're talking to people about their development and their performance. The overused word is value. Okay. So people say things like, and I know you hear it all the time. I say it too, like I'm right in there with you. I want to add value. I want to, I want to make sure my contribution is valuable. Value, 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 value. Right. And what we miss is the fact that value, much like beauty, is in the eye of the beholder. So the only way you know what's truly valuable is to listen for what matters to the person in front of you, right? And so if you're looking if you're an emerging leader that's looking to get to the next level in your career, the first place you need to really sit down and actively listen to what matters to the person that you're speaking to is your people leader, right? Whoever you report into directly, that person, right? You need to learn and know. So when we were at Rise and Thrive and we were at the intensive here in Nashville for 3 days, we talked about, I asked a question and our coaches facilitated a session around, do you know the goals of your leader? This is a great kind of pulse check, right? To see how well do you listen in conversation actively, right? Because this is all about the end goal is better understanding, more meaningful conversations, and to enhance your communication. But you do that by understanding what matters to your, said another way, your audience, right? So your first audience that matters is your leader. Do you know what their goals are for 2024, right? Do you know how they are tracking on their goals for 2023 in this last month of the year? Do you know what their priorities are as they're rounding out the year, right? Those are ways to actively listen so that when you communicate, you're communicating through the lens of what matters most to them, right? That's when communication becomes really impactful, especially when we're talking about really anything, but advancement, influencing action, right? All of that boils down to even sales. Okay. So I spent the first 9 years. I don't feel like I talk about this publicly enough, but I spent the first 9 years of my career in sales at what I believe is one of the best organizations to teach you anything about sales, which is Pfizer. So it was pharmaceutical sales. But I interned with Pfizer, and went through their sales training. I had a former manager. We used to laugh about this. He's like, "You're probably the most trained person in the organization," because I interned during my undergraduate years, and so every summer, I would go through training again. But what I learned as a sales professional is so much of sales isn't talking; it's listening. Right? The only way that I can influence the action of another that's in alignment with a goal that I might have is to understand what matters to them, right? So active listening is important, right? You need to ask questions. What are your priorities? Help me understand what you're focused on. When you're looking at the trajectory of business for 2024, what are some things that you're concerned about? These are questions that you can ask your leader and even your leader's leader in skip level meetings to understand what matters to them, because that is going to improve your communication. That's going to ensure that your contribution is valuable, right? Because it's useful. Another word for value is usefulness, right? And that's subjective. What's useful, here's another way to think about it. It's subjective also depending on the level of the leader that you're talking to. So at Career Thrivers, we design curriculum around 4 levels of leadership: leading yourself, leading teams, leading leaders, and then leading the organization. If you're talking to an organizational leader, think C-suite, maybe even senior director, right? Senior vice president, regional president, more senior. What matters to them, what is useful for them, is going to likely look different than what is useful to maybe a first year people manager, right? So that active listening becomes really important so that you ensure that your message is valuable, right? So that's the first technique. The second is nonverbal communication. So here's the part where I wish we were in the room together, okay? And so if you're interested in learning more about our Rise and Thrive Emerging Women Leaders program, then we're on social here. So feel free to, you can send me a message over on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share more with you. But one of the things that we did together in that room was we talked about grounding, right? And so I'm pretty well grounded right now talking to you. I almost did this standing, but even this is an example, right? So I thought about, right? You might think like, oh, this sounds like it's overthinking, but it's really not, right? Your nonverbal communication matters. So I thought about standing up to facilitate this leadership lab today, and I decided not to. Why? Well, standing, typically, you got more energy if you're speaking, if you're presenting. Usually if I'm doing a keynote, I always stand, like 99.9% of the time, right? But what I thought about today is this is a leadership lab. Like, I want to be able to connect with you beyond the surface level so that we can actually have some real conversation about what might be getting in the way of you speaking up. So as much as I want to share information that is accurate and impactful, I also want to connect with you. So I'm like, I'm going to sit down, right? I want this to feel like we're on FaceTime together, or we are, on a call, and it's just me and you, and you're listening into this, right? And you're able to leverage the chat like many of you are doing, right? To tap in and contribute to this conversation, because even this moment is an opportunity for you to speak up. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit down. Right? I'm going to sit down to create that connection, to be a bit more, some might say informal, but more connected. Okay. So those nonverbal details matter. So I want you to think about things when you're communicating, like your body language, the power of your body language, your facial expressions, the gestures. Sometimes for speakers, we have a program that's for more executive leaders, with helping them with their communication presence. And sometimes we'll notice that executive leaders, they have a powerful message. They know every main point, detail, and asterisk, right, that they want to communicate. But sometimes there's just like nervous energy where they're like, walking side to side, or like fidgeting with the hands. So you want to be mindful around what you're not saying, let me say it this way. You want to be mindful around how what you're not saying is speaking, right? Because pacing from side to side on the stage can give an impression that you're nervous, right? Even small body language tweaks that you can make, like when you're in a virtual meeting and you're presenting, having your feet grounded on the floor. When I said grounded earlier, that's what I meant. So like legs aren't crossed, I'm grounded, shoulders back, sitting up tall. I'm not resting. I'm not leaning back and resting in the chair, right? I'm sitting on the edge of the chair, right? I'm engaged with you in conversation, even though I can't see you, right? So nonverbal communication. I also want you to think about, when it comes to nonverbal communication, one of the most powerful nonverbal techniques is the pause. So anytime you start to feel like during communication, you need to think about what you're going to say, just stop speaking. And what that does, it does two things. One, it gives you an opportunity to let your mind catch up with your mouth, or really it's like for your mouth to catch up with your mind for me anyway. It's like, I am like 5 slides down the road in my head, okay? And I need to give my mouth an opportunity to catch up with my mind, right? To like reel it back a little bit. So it does that. But also, it automatically gathers people's attention, right? Because there's this rhythm and this cadence that's natural to your tone and how you speak. And anytime that is disrupted in conversation, whether it's intentional or not, you bring people's attention back to what you're saying, right? So pausing is a powerful way to speak without speaking. And then last but not least, articulation and clarity, right? So you want to think about how you are articulating your message, right? How are you varying your tone in speech? Let me give you an example that will be pertinent for women, okay? So one thing that you want to be mindful about in your tone and articulation is to not speak with a question mark, right? So you see what I did with my voice, like I increased my pitch at the end of my sentence. And that happens often, and oftentimes it is unconscious, right? So something for you to be mindful of, maybe you have an accountability partner that's on your team where you're saying, hey, anytime that I kind of do that with my voice, right? Because it gives the impression that you're not sure, right? Or that you are unclear, or that you're asking even though you aren't asking, right? So a way to kind of overly correct for that is to decrease your tone at the end of a sentence. So whenever you are about to finish what you're saying, to maybe go down an octave. Right? So did you hear that? Like my tone changed slightly. And I think of it as like putting a period on what I'm saying. So there's not a question of like, am I sure? It's like, no, I'm sure. Right? And so again, very subtle, but extremely loud. The other, I'll kind of pull back the curtains on executive communication for just a moment. But if you have ever sat through a meeting with more senior leaders, you might notice, right, depending on the leader, you might notice that senior leaders ask more questions in meetings than they share information, usually, right? Usually. And so there's a saying, the one who asks the question leads the conversation, and I'm blanking on whose quote that is right now, but it's true, right? And you'll notice that with executive leaders. I remember when I was in marketing at Pfizer, we would do this operational planning around Q3, which was essentially, if you're in marketing or if you've ever been in marketing, you're probably well aware of what I'm speaking of. But it was essentially this kind of all hands on deck planning for the upcoming year for the purpose of budget approval. right? And so the budget approval would always be done by the senior leaders, not only within marketing, but across the business. And there would be this big presentation. And I mean, our team used to prepare intently for it. Like it took me a little bit of time to like get used to the way in which preparation would begin and continue for like this one presentation. But it was a big deal. Like it's, huge budget, and there are these things that we wanted to do to advance the business. And so you'd get in those meetings and present essentially your case, right, for your brand. And the part that every marketer would be so focused on would be the end, not what they were presenting. Like you would know that cold, but you never quite knew the questions that you would get. So I remember in our practice sessions, many of the marketers would spend more time on scenario or role playing scenario based questions. Like, what if, we know this leader cares a lot about X, Y, and Z. They might ask a question here. And there would literally be, questions that could or could not, may or may not be answered. And you would think about that for like your appendix slides, but also how you're going to answer the question, because the most senior leaders, they might not share a lot, but they're going to ask questions. So that's something that you can take as well to improve your communication techniques, to think about how can I be thoughtful in asking clarifying questions to ensure that I know information. Last thing that I'm going to say on this topic is that's also a hack for speaking up. Okay. So when I was early in my career, and I am naturally very thoughtful and used to have a mindset that I want to make sure, like, many of you perhaps, I want to make sure that what I contribute is valuable. So I'm going to sit here and overthink my contribution until the meeting's almost over. Right. And I would have to be really intentional. And so early on in my journey of speaking up more, the way that I would speak up would be to ask a question. But that's actually a really great technique, right? It gets you in the practice of sharing your voice. It gets you in the practice of contributing to the meeting, but it's also a great way to be a valuable asset in the meeting, right? So have we considered this? Or I noticed this. Have we thought about this alternative? Or can you tell me more about why this is a priority, right? So ways that you can speak up in the meeting, right? Add your voice, but also infuse questions. Okay. So those are some techniques for you. Now, when it comes to building confidence, right? We already said you need courage, right? And I'm checking in with y'all in the chat. Okay. So Alexandra says, I love useful as another word for value. So good. Yes. Yes. Think of value as usefulness. Suzanne says that's so true. Listening to the heartbeat of your internal clients. Yes. Your boss, your team, your customers is essential. So, so true. And that's a great way to think of it, right? Your manager, if you're a people leader, your team, those are your clients, right? You're working with and for them. So make sure that you're serving them by knowing what matters. Okay. So when it comes to building confidence, again, here are just some quick things you can keep in mind. Self-affirmations, literally something that I practice. We have a product at Career Thrivers that is a deck of affirmation cards. And so the affirmation cards are based around your performance, your mindset, networking, right? One that I share often with myself, right? So an affirmation that I use is people want to hear what I have to share, right? Another one that I often say is people want to say yes to me. So if you're an entrepreneur, right, and you're pitching and you're, negotiating and putting together proposals, right, it's an affirmation that you can use that boosts your confidence. This picture, right, this kind of like superhero mirror pose has actually been shown to increase confidence, especially when it comes to like keynoting and presenting. It's a thought that motion creates emotion, and it does, right? So when you have these kind of powerful, whatever your affirmation might be, whether it's words or whether it's you looking at yourself in the mirror and doing these power poses, right? That really helps to boost the hormones in your body to increase your level of confidence, especially if you're going to be on stage doing something. Highly recommend, right? I have my own practice when I'm keynoting. Usually I'm not like super chatty before, so I'm very thoughtful and mindful, but especially if I'm doing like virtual keynotes, which are still very much a thing in 2023. So organizations are still working the hybrid model, right? And teams are tuning in remotely. So oftentimes I'm here like I am right now in my office, right? I've got my desk in stand-up mode. I'm standing up and I'm standing here doing squats, okay? Because and saying those affirmations, right? To really build that adrenaline and that confidence, and it works, right? Visualization also works. If you have a cadence of meetings with your leader or with your team, spend time visualizing how that's going to go. If you have I say that because I want you to think about not just the big presentations, but also those that are a cadence. Because here's the deal. Every time you speak, it's an opportunity for people to learn more about you. I want you to finish this sentence in the comments, in the chat section. It's not what you know, but I'm going to practice a pause and let you feel it in that sentence, right? So it's not what you know, but it's, how would you answer that? How would you answer that? And I see y'all in the chat tuning in. Yes, yes, Suzanne. People want to say yes to you. They absolutely do. People want to say yes to me is a very strong to overcome the fear of rejection. It certainly is. It certainly is. Yes, yes, yes. I'll never forget how Meredith would do the pose before surgery in Grey's Anatomy. Yes, that's such a good picture. And listen, it works, right? So you might have that, power pose. Maybe it's hands on the hips, maybe it's this kind of like superhero muscle pose, whatever it is for you, right? But you don't know what works for you until you work something. So you got to try it out, right? And that's how you learn, like, okay, I've got my rhythm. So squats works for me. Squats works for me. Okay, I see Eliana is first up in the comment section, right? With our answer. Yes, so it's not what you know, and it's not who you know, but it's who knows you. So every time you speak up, and here's why I want you to recalibrate your thinking on speaking up with people that you already know. Because I know what your mind is telling you, because it's the same thing that my mind used to tell me. It's like, oh, well, they already know what I do. They don't. Okay. Even your leader. Mhm. Even your leader likely isn't 100% clear on everything that you do. So it becomes really critical for you to be very intentional about speaking up, building the confidence, overcoming the fear to share what you do to ensure that they know you. Yes, yes, you know them, right? But do they know you? Do they know your skills, your values? Do they know the level of contribution? Do they know the results that you're getting? Do they know what your clients are telling you? Do they know the customer feedback that you're receiving out in the field? Do they know that? Likely not. But guess how they'll learn it? When you share it, right? So that speaking up is important. So you might need to visualize that might be outside of your comfort zone. Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay. Anything, not anything, most things that are outside of our comfort zone are invitations for us to grow. Right. So if it's outside of your comfort zone, if it's outside of your natural rhythm of how you speak about yourself, it's an opportunity. That could be your one thing, right? And just as a heads up, I'm going to ask you what your one thing is at the end of this. And we're wrapping up here in just a second. So visualization techniques is helpful. And then last but not least, stepping out of your comfort zone, right? So whatever that is for you, but being intentional about those calculated risks is going to help you with your communication skills. And then lastly, we talked about this, right, is body language and vocal tone. So I hope that you're on our Career Thrivers email list. If you're not, you can head on over to seenheardandvalued.com and get a free class from us. It's a 3-part video series on how to become more seen, heard, and valued in the work that you choose to do. It will also, if you click the opt-in button, include you on our newsletter. And I shared that because just today we sent out a phenomenal HBR article, and I'll go back through and put the link in the comments for you here if you're listening in. But there was a phenomenal article on how powerful vocal tone is, your pace, your inflection, the pauses, and some really great ways for you to infuse more of that in your conversation. So we talked a little bit about that in meetings, right? But you want to be really mindful about that to engage your listeners. And then finally, as we wrap up, we couldn't have a topic about speaking up without addressing some of the difficult situations that you may find yourself in, or situations that make it more challenging, like negotiating, right? 3 questions that I need you to think about asking yourself when it comes to your negotiation skills to help you to rewire your brain that maybe you aren't good at negotiating, or it makes you feel uncomfortable, or whatever negative self-talk you may have around this topic. 3 questions to ask yourself. What do I want? Why do I want it? And who do I need to help me accomplish it? What do I want? I want to be promoted within the next 18 months. Why do I want it? You need to fill in that question, right? The most important one. And then who do I know that can help me get there? So yes, your leader is important, your direct manager, but maybe there is another advocate, sponsor, right, within the department that you want to transition to. Maybe there's a mentor. Maybe there is someone you need to have an informational interview with to learn a little bit more because you actually want to get promoted into a different business unit, right? So what do I want? Why do I want it? And who can help me get there? Those 3 questions are going to help to bolster your negotiation skills, because it's not always about the somewhat surface skill of, am I good at negotiating? It really becomes about those power skills of listening, those power skills of relationship management, those power skills of sharing what it is that I want. But what I found when we are working with emerging women leaders, the biggest disconnect is that oftentimes emerging women leaders don't know the answers to those questions, myself formerly included, right? Even in an ongoing way, like that, what do I want question? Like that's one of those questions that's almost always right at the top of the list, because it gives you an opportunity to become more self-aware as you are evolving, right? Because you are continuing to evolve every day. So that check-in, okay, what do I want? We're heading into 2024. We're at the end of December. We're in between the holiday season. You've got a few more weeks, depending on your vacation schedule at the end of the year, and your business, your company. What do I want? What do I want the end of this year to look like? What do I want for 2024? Why is that important to me? Why do I want that? And then who do I know, or who do I need to know that can help me get there? Second challenge is around constructive feedback. Here's what I've learned about this, especially if you are a people leader. Honesty is empathy. Honesty is empathy. So as a leader, don't feel hesitant to give feedback that is constructive, or that you might perceive to be, or they might perceive to be negative, right? If you are giving me feedback on how I can improve, please do, right? I will ask you for it at the end of this, throughout it, right? Drop a line in my inbox, right? If you don't want to share, but feedback is a gift, right? And honest feedback is the truest gift. So you want to be sure that you're being honest in giving feedback, because that is empathy, right? That's what you would want. You would want someone to be honest with you about how you're showing up, how you're performing. And then last but not least, conflict resolution. For whatever reason, we don't like to admit that we have conflict in the workplace. And it's always odd to me, because it's like, well, whenever you have people present that are different, that's all the time, then conflict is going to be inevitable, right? It may be big, it may be small, it may be disruptive, it may be something that can be dismissed, but it's there, right? And so you want to resolve it as soon as possible. And one of the frameworks that we teach at Career Thrivers is a framework called Empathy Conversations. The short of it is, you want to ask a question first. You want to replace your I statements with inquiry so that you can understand where the other person is coming from. That helps us to prioritize empathy. Empathy is all about, how do I sit my ego aside and step into the understanding, the mindset, the belief, the experience of the person that's in front of me, of my teammate, of my leader, of my direct reports, right? And again, going back to listening, the only way that I can really do that is to listen to them. So if I'm trying to resolve a conflict, it's more important for me to ask a good question to understand where they're coming from than it is for me to share how I feel. And again, that might be a paradigm shift, but if you are looking to create a more engaged, connected, productive, high performing team, empathy matters for leadership. All right. So as we wrap up here, we are speaking up, amplifying our voice, but oftentimes that includes for causes or for change that we want to see. So if you are in that space where you might be part of an affinity group or part of a committee or part of a task force that is connected to a change management strategy inside of your organization, whether it's a new way of doing things, a new system, a new process, right? A new priority, a new strategic objective. You want to be intentional around collaborative partnerships. Who can you partner with to see this change come to fruition, right? We do a lot of work at the intersection of helping organizations develop or amplify their diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies, right? That is all about collaborative partnership. HR can't do it alone. The DEI team can't do it alone. You have to have business leaders on board, every business unit, right? You have to have a global approach, right? Because DEI at global organizations isn't just about the challenges within the US. So you want to be collaborative, but you also want to think about social activism, right? And a lot of times that comes through employee resource groups in terms of how they're thinking about serving the community, right? Being a part of change. At larger corporations, there's usually an ESG team, right? Or corporate social responsibility team that's thinking about social activism, but sometimes that needs to be connected to the business, the people, and there might be liaisons, right, within the business. And that's all about using your voice, right? Sharing information, whether it's verbally or written. And then last but not least, creating a supportive environment where everyone can thrive. So as we wrap up here, any questions that you have, I want to go through the chat. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll share the link to our Confident Speaker Lab. This is a new offering that we are sharing. It is course, coaching, in a community, right? Those three things combined that are really helping you to step into your power as an impactful speaker. And this is really for those leaders who want to understand the art and science of speaking, right? How can I be more seen, heard, and valued as a leader through speaking? And perhaps, right, if you are curious around the business of speaking, there's information on that as well. So it has been so phenomenal getting to share with you today. What questions do you have? And I want you to drop into the chat. I shared with you that I would ask, what is your one thing? What is the one thing that you're either going to implement? Maybe one thing that you want to change, one thing that you want to remember, that you're going to take away from today's session. And you can just type in my one thing is. Definitely want to hear that from you. And I love that you all really resonated with yes. This is probably one of my most favorite affirmations. People want to say yes to me. People want to say yes to me. How do you communicate what you do know? Such a great question, right? Because people want to know that you know it, that you have garnered this experience or this expertise or gotten these results, right? How are you communicating that? Yes. Fantastic, you all. Awesome. Oh, I see a comment here. Prioritize courage over clarity. Welcome to us, the perfectionists. Yeah. Yes, I'm glad to see I'm not alone. Okay, recovering perfectionist here for sure, and that reframe, that mental shift has definitely been helpful. It's definitely been helpful. All right. So if you have any questions around how we can further support you when it comes to speaking up and standing out, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. If this information is something that you think would be helpful for your organization, you can always reach us at careerthrivers.com/contact. And you can schedule a call with one of our team members. We believe in the power of coaching. We believe in helping companies cultivate a culture of coaching, especially to better serve women, to better support women as you advance in your career, as you are engaged in your performance in your organization, but also as you look for opportunities to advance, right? Coaching is a great way to do that. And what we find is that most emerging women leaders have never experienced career or leadership coaching. So you don't have a real grasp of what it looks like, how it can support you, and how it might be a way that you can really take this information and use it to speak up and stand out. So, with that, I'm so glad that you all joined me today. I know there's a little bit of a lag on my end with seeing the comments. So, please know I definitely want to hear from you. I will come back around here and um, chat with you in the comments. So, make sure, even if you have a question later that comes up to mind, feel free to do that. And if you're watching this on a different platform, just know you can comment there as well. But the primary place that this will live is on LinkedIn. All right. Your voice matters. People want to say yes to you. And one of your greatest superpowers is speaking up and using your voice to thrive in your career. Until next time, take care and let's thrive together.